right, everyone. Welcome back to the DGS Presents YouTube channel where we play with dead things, or at least we talk about them. Today, we're actually going to get a bit technical, and we're going to talk about some of the more difficult, problematic, confusing rules found within the OG of role-playing games, which, of course, is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, unless, of course, you're talking about basic Dungeons & Dragons as well. And to do this, I'm going to bring back on board DM Greg, otherwise known as St. Cuthbert of the Cudgel. He is our resident AD&D maestro and a guy that really just plays AD&D for like 50 years or whatever it is, because he's older than me. He's an old bastard. So how you doing, Greg?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
Good. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up real quick the rules that we're going to talk about. And Greg and I are just going to kind of go back and forth. The first 5 are mine. The last 5 are Greg. So there's 10. And we're going to kind of go back and forth. So these are the ones we're going to look at today. Now, it says the most problematic up here. I mean, I don't know if they're the most, but they're just ones that basically have traditionally confused DMs and players alike for decades, and can be a little bit tricky to work with. So these are them. Got the surprise system, dragons casting spells, this and that. And we're going to go through these in detail, some more than others. And hopefully this will help. I think the viewers are going to learn a couple things they didn't know, even if they're veteran AD&D players, because I know that over the years, and I've combed through the DMG and the Player's Handbook and some of the supplements and Dragon Magazine and Polyhedra and everything else. I found some weird things that like I didn't even really know about, or maybe I was doing wrong for a long, long time. So to kick it off, the first one I want to talk about, which is probably the most technical, is the surprise system. So the surprise system in AD&D, as laid out in the Dungeon Master's Guide, is a bit tricky. And just as a recap, I want to talk about how initiative is handled, because unless you understand initiative, you're not going to understand the surprise system.
Right.
So initiative in AD&D, if you play it raw, like the way it's really written, is each side, players and DM's characters, monsters, NPCs, whatever, roll a 1d6 to determine the other side's initiative segment. That is actually how it is written. So if you roll, like for instance, if the DM rolls a 3 and the PCs roll a 6, the PCs go first in that round, but the monsters act on segment 6. So the PCs roll 6. We rolled high, and that determines when the monsters act. They act on segment 6, and the PCs will act on segment 3. Now, that's
already confusing, Colin.
And that is exactly how it's written in DMG page 65. So it is a little weird, right? Because it introduces, it harkens to segments, right? There's 10 6-second segments in a combat round, but the initiative roll is a D6. Already, but when you start talking about this, DMs, their eyes start to glaze over, like, okay, well, how does this make sense, right? It makes sense because of 2 things. Because of weapon speed and because of the segments on which a spell will be cast. And some spells, for instance, like Flame Strike, the cleric spell, take 8 segments to cast or more. There's some that take a full round.
Right.
Which means, let's go back to my original example. The PCs in this combat round are acting on segment 3. The cleric is going to launch a Flame Strike at the orcs, which means he normally goes at segment 8. He is going to go at the very end of the round with that, right? Because it's beyond 6. Now, what about weapon speed? Here's the thing. Did you even use weapon speed back in the day, Greg?
I have avoided it at all costs. I believe as a DM that it just slows the game down too much. Interesting idea, but too slow for the game?
Yeah, so weapon speed was basically it's in there. Not many people use it, but if you're going to play AD&D raw and you're going to use the initiative and the surprise system as written, you have to use weapon speed. Otherwise, the whole thing breaks down. So, for instance,
right,
if same example again, right? The PCs roll a 6, the DM rolls a 3. The PCs will act on segment 3 with their attacks, but then you have to take into account your weapon speed. So let's say you have a weapon speed 4. You add it to the 3 to get segment 7, and that's when you're going to go. Well, why did Gary do this? Well, he did it largely because of spellcasting. We have to determine when spells go off during combat. But here's where it gets even crazier. In the DMG, at one point, Gary writes that if you have a fast enough weapon and you depending on the initiative roll, the D6 roll, you can get 2 attacks a round. Even if you're a first level. You can hit somebody twice with a longsword or a dagger. So that gets a little crazy already, right? So you're not a high level fighter that gets multiple attack routines, this kind of thing. Like, you're just a low level guy. But if you have a fast enough weapon and the dice go your way, you can get multiple attacks. So that can be a little problematic.
Now, although it makes sense, right? I mean, you think about what was going on in Gary's head at the time. You've got a dagger, I've got a 2-handed sword. It makes sense that I could probably stab you 2 or 3 times before you could actually swing, draw back, and swing again, right?
It does, yeah. And another, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but another issue with this is claws and teeth.
Right.
Those I think are basically considered like speed 1.
Right.
Which it gives the monsters a bit of an advantage, right? If they're attacking. At one point, and again, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but Gary also at one point in the DMG, when he's talking about weapon speed, talks about weapons that have a speed above 10, like the pike. And he has this section where he talks about how, soldiers aligned in a group and they're picking up their pikes. And he seems to suggest, but he doesn't clarify, that because the pike has a weapon speed of 12, it's going to take more than a round to attack in the first round of combat. But it's unclear. It's like, well, what does 12 segments mean? Because there's only 10 segments per round, right? So what does 12 mean? Is that the next round?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I usually use a pike on the weekends when you and I are hanging out and we're role playing. Figure I've got some experience. A 12 is too fast. I think it should be more like a 20. It's like moving a truck.
Now this brings us to surprise. Okay, so surprise is interwoven in this whole thing, and in the section on surprise, which I think starts on DMG page 61, 60, 61. Initially, when Gary outlines this system, it's very straightforward, right? Each side rolls a d6 to see if they're surprised, right? And if you roll a 1 or a 2, you're surprised, or both sides could be surprised if they both roll a 1 or a 2, and this kind of thing.
Right.
It also ties into, which, like, nobody uses this rule. I don't think anybody uses this rule anymore. Encounter distance. When PCs are outside and there's monsters outside, and you let's say you encounter a band of orcs, true to its miniatures gaming past, we have to determine the encounter distance, right? How far away the PCs are from the enemy. And a normal encounter distance, right, on page 49 of the DMG, is between 6 and 24 feet. But surprise will lower the distance. So a surprise roll of 1, for example, lowers the encounter distance to 5 feet to 23 feet.
Okay. I wonder if Gary got those distance stats from the FBI data that they use in basic, crimes when they personal attacks upon a person. That's about the same distance. So really? Be ready. 23 feet. Anyone walking near you. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. It may be. I'm wondering too if they're in chainmail. I don't recall.
The FBI don't wear chainmail. I don't think they do.
But yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So again, when we're running an encounter, the first thing we determine is encounter distance in relation to surprise, right? We want to figure out how far away are the PCs from the enemy and who is surprised. So surprise is a 2 and 6 chance for each side, and it's modified by your reaction bonus. Right? If your reaction bonus will basically affect the surprise in mutual surprise situations.
As it should.
Right. So, for instance, if you have a very low dexterity, and let's say you have a penalty of -3, right, that is going to increase the chance of you being surprised. And right, and obviously a bonus will mitigate that. Right, makes you less likely to be surprised. Now, in let me pull this up real quick here. In the DMG, there's this weird little table that a lot of people think is a typo or a mistake. Because what starts to happen after giving us the general rule for surprise is Gary started comparing die rolls and subtracting the surprise dice from each other to get lost segments. So now here's where the trouble starts up. We know that if we roll a 1 or a 2, right, we might be surprised for 1 segment, or we might be surprised for 2. But you see here in the final row, you could be surprised for 3 segments. And then in the next paragraph, or maybe 2 paragraphs down, Gary then starts to talk about creatures who have the ability to really surprise you, right? Like, let's say a lurker above. I think a lurker above surprises on a 1 to 4. And in his example, Gary actually has creatures. I don't know which one off the top of my head. I looked. I couldn't really find one that surprises on a 5 or 5 out of 6. Now, why is this important, and why does this whole thing start to break down? Because in his example, he actually gives an example where you can be surprised for 4 segments. And then he says each segment should be treated as a full combat round. So if it's a really sneaky creature and it surprises your character, depending on your reaction bonus or penalty in the situation, you could get surprised for 4 segments, and that creature will get 4 attacks on you at least. But it gets worse. Then Gary goes on to say that if missile weapons are involved, the surprise segments will allow the attackers to attack at 3 times the normal rate of fire.
I remember reading that. Yeah.
Okay.
This requires a high level of algebraic formulas, correct?
Yeah. So now this whole thing is starting to come undone because it's starting not to make any sense anymore. And the reason and I touched on this on a previous episode. I can't remember which one it was, but you can get into a situation where, let's say you have some drow attacking the characters, and they have enhanced surprise, and they have their arrows or their bows and arrows ready, or their crossbows. They can get like 12 attacks on you in one combat round because of the surprise segments. Okay, it's kind of an unwritten rule in AD&D that 10 segments within a round means 10 maximum actions. Remember, like the god Death and the deities and demigods attacks once per segment with his death sword to kill people. Okay, it makes 0 sense, right, for some low-level monster to have more attacks in a combat round than the god of Death. Right, so here's where we see where this is like broken and not making any sense. Now, why is this thing broken? Well, because of that. But also because segments were, like I said, were originally introduced as a way to determine when spellcasters are able to cast spells, not really for combat procedures. And if you are going to do this, you're going to have to introduce weapon speed. And then, like I said before, if a weapon is really slow, let's say a great sword has a speed factor of 10, depending on your roll, are you then going to act in the following round? Like, because you're above 10 segments? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, that would make sense, right? Like you said, you use a pole arm or a pike and you're moving at a weapon speed of 12. Sure. I mean, Kind of makes sense, but way too confusing, especially for me.
It's way too, and it gets worse. Okay.
Can it get worse, Colin?
It does get worse. In the beginning of the surprise section, pages 61 through 62, 63, Gary says that you can cast spells during the surprise segment.
Yeah.
And then on page 71, he says the opposite. He says you can't. So there's a total contradiction there. It's like, okay, can we or can we not cast spells during surprise segments? I don't know, right? Because he contradicts himself.
Well, I think you're gonna find too is DMs have whittled it down to make it as simple to keep the game moving, right? Like in our games, we've streamlined it to the point of surprise. If you're surprised, right, we do a quick, you get the first attack with any modifiers that are appropriate. Mm-hmm. Second round, the surprising party goes first, and then third round, you're back to normal rolling initiative. That's what we do.
Right. Yeah. There's a number of ways to fix this. The last complaint I have about it, and this is probably my main complaint, is that the dex reaction, the reaction bonus, right, or penalties for surprise doesn't really make sense. Because at the beginning of the section, Gary talks about determining surprise for the party,
right,
not for the individual. And then he starts talking about, well, you can use the individual with the best reaction bonus. That's fine, but it gets back into that issue I had when that first episode you and I did, Greg, where I said that very, very high dex characters tend to break the game.
Yep.
Because you have situations where one side is always winning initiative and never surprised.
That's right.
That removes realism from the game. All right. I mean, you're not psychic. You don't have ESP and know everything around you. Like that to me is too powerful.
Well, and there's other things that play into it as well, right? Like a ranger surprised on, 1 and 4, 1 and 5 on a D6. It's if they're wearing chainmail armor, really, they're making noise. There's so many different things that play into it, and to each DM, right, to their own, right? They modify it to make sure the game moves, and modify it so that it still retains some level of the original game.
Right. Now, just to wrap this up, how to fix this? Well, this was fixed in second edition. And this is kind of like how you and I play, right, Greg, with our game and everything. Second edition went to D10, all right, for initiative and surprise. A 1 in 3 result indicated a surprise. If a PC in the party is scouting ahead and keeping watch, that character's reaction bonus can mitigate the surprise, but you have to be very, very specific as players and saying, we want, our halfling scout up front, checking things out.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just straight up surprise roll. But here's the catch. In second edition, the attacker who surprises gets 1 round of actions. That's it. And cannot cast spells during the surprise roll. During the surprise round. Okay. So there's none of this 3 times per segment you can attack and you can get there's none of that, right? This was basically fixed in second edition. The other way to fix it, if you want to stick with AD&D, is limit surprise to 1 or 2 segments and get rid of this other stuff with the 3-time attack roll.
Right.
So that is surprise, a very, very long-winded example, but that's probably one of the things that people really don't know. And it almost vast majority of people don't know that rule about what segment the opponent acts on, right? When you do the opposing D6 rules. So that's something not too many people know about. But anyway, let's move on to you, Greg, here. I think the first thing that you had was paralysis.
Yep. One that's probably been beaten to death over the years. However, there's multiple references to paralysis. And, when you go through the monster manual and you look at things like ghouls or ghasts or other various monsters or spells, when there's no duration assigned to paralysis, it's one of the biggest questions, right? Especially when you are a new DM or you're starting a new campaign, your lower level characters are going to eventually run into a ghoul. And there's many references, right? So the one that I use the most would be what I love is probably one of my most favorite modules would be T1, the Village of Hamlet. Written by Gygax, actually play tested according to the son of the owner here. You see my shirt. Toad Hall Books and Records out in Rockford, Illinois. Give them a nice little plug. It's, to my knowledge, it is the oldest functioning record and book resale shop in the state of Illinois. They got awesome T-shirts. This one makes me look fat, but I got to go get a new one. Well, I heard the new ones make me look skinny, so, and about 10 years younger, so I'll have to go get one. But Toad Hall is an awesome store. So if you're ever in the Rockford, Illinois area, I would say stop out there. They sell a lot of goods. They have a lot of D&D stuff as well, but love the shop. And so Gygax play tested the Village of Hamlet, according to the son of the previous owner, who was his dad. And they still retain the table with the 6 chairs. It's pretty cool to go out there and just kind of sit there and think about it. But within the T1 module, I use that as my reference for how long does paralysis last when you don't have a definition, because it's written in a 1979 module by Gygax. And even though you have a 1981 Polyhedron magazine that references duration of paralysis, you also have, you can go way back to chainmail. There's a page 37 within the chainmail supplement that talks about paralysis, but they're not really defined as well as it is in the Village of Hamlet. So avoid room 15 in the Village of Hamlet, in the dungeon, at the Moat House, because it's for first level characters, it's pretty wicked. But if you're an elf, I suppose you can survive. That's the resource I use. And it's 3 to 12 turns. That's a pretty long time to be paralyzed. But
yeah,
I don't think anyone, ghouls are
you're dead. Yeah, you're screwed.
Well, if you're alone, you're food.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that room is like totally deadly. And then of course, on the way to the Moat House, you can get swallowed whole by the giant frogs.
Yeah, those are always fun too, especially if you're a halfling. Yeah, that's like a snack. But that's what I use as a reference. I use T1. It's simple. It's straightforward. What is it? I said it was room 15. Is it? It's page 15. Room. What is it? I have it down here. We have it in our notes, don't we? Yes, we do. It's page 15. And what room is that? Is it room 14? So what happens with old age?
That's I'm going to say 10.
No, it's room 14, the burial crypts, on page 15 of T1. So great reference if you ever want to know how long paralysis lasts. If you don't have an answer, quick reference.
Cool, good deal. Okay, let's move on to my next one, which is, and this one will be quick, is at what level do dragons cast spells? It's not clear. The monster manual doesn't really tell us what level spellcaster a dragon would be. Right now, dragons, they're given sizes, right? Small, average, huge, this kind of thing, and it connects to hit dice, but it really doesn't say what level spellcaster a dragon is. Polyhedron magazine number 20 came out, and they tried to clarify this in the kind of sage advice section. They said that, at what level do dragons cast spells? And the answer was, that is a function of the spell level that they can cast. If a dragon can use 4th level spells, that's also the level of ability. Well, that doesn't really clarify too much. I mean, okay, again, what level is he? I would say here, Greg, just assign a spellcaster level to dragons according to their size and age.
Right. Yeah, I think hit dice is probably a good way to look at it, right?
Yeah, I would say that's the best way to handle this. This is easily fixed. It's not like the surprise system. Just give if you have a dragon in your encounter, let's say an ancient, huge red dragon, give them a caster level of 10 or 12 or something along those lines.
Right. Man, I'll tell you though, aren't dragons in first edition just super underpowered? I mean, I couldn't imagine coming up against Smaug with a short sword and actually having any chance.
Yeah, I think they're powerful, but I seem to recall, and again, maybe we can do an episode on this, is that in basic D&D, the dragons tend to be more powerful. I think, and I don't remember all the reasons why, but again, that's a little off topic here, but you are correct. I think you could beef them up. They could be a little more powerful, but also depends on the way the DM plays it.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You leave them on the ground. Yeah. They need to be airborne.
Yeah. I remember DMs basically not only having them airborne, but basically just plopping down on us. just like literally landing on us like full speed and doing like 10 to 100 damage.
Yeah. Is it Mayfair Games that created that supplement Roll Aids, the one with Lich Lords and stuff? Okay, yeah. So
they one for dragons, right?
Yeah, they actually did an entire there's a Roll Aids supplement by Mayfair Games on dragons, and it beefs them up. Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's get an episode. We're just going to talk about that.
About dragons.
I totally want to look at that supplement, and I want to discuss, because that would be a cool thing to read, because I don't think I've ever read through that whole supplement.
I love dragons.
Oh, there you go. Here, show that to us again. There we go.
You guys have seen him in a game.
Is that a black dragon?
Oh yeah, racist.
Yeah, that's the giant black dragon. So, okay, moving over to you. You have some stuff you want to talk about aerial combat.
Oh my gosh, I avoid it at all costs. It's so not only are there like how many pages in the DMG, like 4 full pages devoted to 6 full pages devoted to aerial combat. I'll tell you, as a DM who wants to keep the game moving and not overcomplicate, aerial combat it starts on page 49 or so, 48 in the DMG, and it goes on for about 6 pages. Simply, this has to be one of the most confusing, but also if you think about it from a DM perspective, at least I do, the way I approach it is, let's say you have let's say you have a 4th level fighter who just found a potion of flying and he's going to take it. How proficient, and that's the word I like to use when I look at new skills, new abilities that are potentially very deadly, very unique. Flying would be one of those, right? I mean, sure, it's easy to go 120 yards outside flying at maximum speed in a straight line, but that's kind of like, it's kind of like a 4-year-old on a bike. At some point you're going to run into a light pole and bounce off of it, like I did when I was 4. Point is, it's difficult. It's not simple. And turning only makes it more complex. But then put a player character up against, a Manicore that's been flying for the last 25 years, or a dragon, or even an eagle, or a Puritan. Any type of creature that has an innate ability to fly and has been is going to outperform any PC who's just picked up a potion of flying, or a mage who casts fly for the first time. So I think aerial combat is one that, if you want to get into it, plenty of references, plenty of detail. It makes sense. However, I just streamline it, make it simple. You're a PC, you're at a disadvantage. The creatures are going to attack. They're going to have full advantage, speed, mobility, you name it. So I just approach it more simply, trying to keep the game moving. But those are just some thoughts on it. That's where you can find aerial combat details within the DMG. And as a DM, you may want to just consider streamline it, give the PC a disadvantage, and falling, it hurts.
Indeed. Okay. Yeah, I know that the flying stuff it's right up there with the pummeling and grappling table.
Right. Yeah. Avoid at all costs. Yeah. Do you hit? Good. Do some
damage. I remember you run that raw. In our adventure, the pummeling stuff, I've been pulling out the percentile dice and everything. Yeah. So, but yeah,
sometimes it's cool. Sometimes it's totally cool. I mean, I'm a big advocate of let the dice tell the story, because I don't know. I think when Gygax and Aronson wrote this, there was some magic in the books where the dice will draw and build the best story you could ever come up with. And we got some pictures at the end about minis that you and I can tell the story when your mage was getting beat on by a zombie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. Let's see. Moving on to the next one. I have, this is a very simple thing, but this confuses some people too. In AD&D, moving and attacking, can you do it? So we know that in other versions of D&D, basic D&D, 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th, whatever, you can move typically like 30 feet and attack in the same combat round. You can't really do that in AD&D. You have essentially, there's a maneuver called a charge that you have to do, because according to the DMG, normal melee is not possible when opponents begin the round over 10 feet apart from each other. A round must be spent closing. You have to close to attack. Now, alternatively, the attacker may choose to charge. Now, remember, outdoors, movement is different than indoors. Right? Outdoors is in yards, and indoors is within feet. So and it's also determined by the armor worn. So you might have a move of 120 if you're in like padded armor, and you might have movement of 90 if you're in, let's say, plate mail. So you have to keep that straight. And then and here's, not too many people know about this, if you are charging outside, charging bipeds receive a 1/3 movement bonus in the charge round. So you can move farther than you normally would be able to. Now, there is no dexterity bonus allowed for charging creatures. You lose your dex bonus. Creatures with no dexterity bonus become 1 armor class worse. There's no penalty for AC 10. You don't go to 11. The melee at the end of the charge. Initiative is not checked at the end of the charge movement. The opponent with the longer weapon or reach attacks first. Charging creatures gain +2 on their to hit dice if they survive any opponent's attack. So remember, there is also the maneuver set spear versus charge, which you can get hit by if you're trying to charge somebody and they have a spear. Not recommended.
So, no, don't charge spears.
Yeah, exactly. So just remember, like under normal circumstances in AD&D, you cannot move and attack in the same combat round, unless both of you are inside a tiny little enclosed space, 10 feet wide or whatever. Then maybe you can do that. But normally you can't move like down a hallway and hits 30 feet and attack somebody. You have to charge, and sure, you get a bonus to hit. But you can also get impaled at the end of a spear, and you could get hit first if you do that. So not too many people know about that that rule involving moving and attacking in AD&D.
Well, that's why I keep that pike on hand that I told you about earlier in the episode. Is I always have a pike handy just in case I get charged by an attacking person. So I always just pull my pike out.
There you go. But it is speed 12 though.
Yeah, well, but if you got it set and you're ready for the charge,
true. If you have it set, you're good, right?
Yeah, I go first, right?
All right. So that goes back to you there, Greg. How about PCs gaining experience selling gems and jewelry?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. So within the DMG on page 25, you got the gems chart. Always fun. I would recommend for any DM. If you have PCs that are finding random gems or jewelry, let them roll in the charts, right? Any chance you can get players to be engaged, any chance you can get them to keep rolling dice to some degree, right? Not slowing the game down too much. It's always fun to have them roll around the table, get them involved. But the concern here is, well, how do you award experience, right? Do you award experience based upon the value of the gem as rolled or assigned, or do you give the experience based upon what they actually do with it? So I prefer letting them gain the experience based upon what they do with those items found, right? The gems or the jewelry. And jewelry, by chance, is just amazing, right? You're talking thousands of points of experience if you give a 1-for-1 on gold piece value. So I never allow PCs to sell gems or jewelry in towns and get 100%, right? It's not a 1-for-1. There's no jeweler that's going to give you, it's like taking your car in and getting ripped off by any car salesperson. So, or not getting ripped off, I suppose. Maybe you know them and they're giving you a great value. Point is, it's never a 1-for-1. And that's the point that I like to make as a DM is if you're going to go into a town, you're going to take a 100 gold piece gem. Always remember, go to the currency exchange, because otherwise you may be violating some laws within the keep or within the town. But it's a diminishing value on the return. Therefore, the experience is awarded after. I think it's the best way to go.
Yeah, the local pawn shop is not going to give you the DMG listed price.
No,
they're going to discount it quite a bit and then sell it back to you at a highly inflated price.
Right. Well, that's true too, right? Is going to purchase those as well. I think I don't recall where I saw it. Maybe I have to look it up, but I think there was, maybe it was in the Village of Hamlet. There's the currency exchange. It inflates the values or deflates them by like 10 to 30%, something like that. Tends to make sense. Good rule of thumb.
Great. Good deal. Okay, my next one, I'm very brief. I'm going to spend on this. Just because it's the thing that drives me crazy, but the encumbrance rules, right? Which are in the player's handbook, page 102, DMG book, DMG page 225. There's confusion over what this really means with the encumbrance. The thing I'm going to point out is that encumbrance is not weight. And a lot of people get confused between gold piece weight and encumbrance. Example, a staff has a weight of 100 gold coins or 10 encumbrance pounds. So don't confuse those two things together. There was a Dragon Magazine article about this, which I guess is incorrect, called How Many Coins in a Coffer? I think it's issue 80, where this guy talks about, well, how much does a gold piece really weigh and how big does it need to be? And it's just complete, just going down a rabbit hole, right? Later editions of D&D, yeah, second edition, third, yeah, they did kind of fix this. The encumbrance in gold piece was always, I'm not good at math. I don't want to sit and get the calculator out and start figuring this out. Definitely simplify that. Other systems use slots for encumbrance. I think Shadow Dark uses that. There's some new systems that use that. It's just like, hey, you have X number of slots. This is what you can carry. Okay, keep it simple. It's a total waste of time to spend like inordinate amounts of hours trying to figure out how much your paladin can carry like through a dungeon. There's nothing fun about that. So
but I think though, you know, to that point, it is good to keep a handle on how much they can carry, where it's located. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Right. At some point, you want to have your players not be able to carry out 10,000 gold pieces in a small sack, and they've got, you know, 2 swords, a shield, backpack, and all the dungeoneering supplies. That's always fun as a DM, I find. Right. Manage it that way, right? 100 pounds of feathers is a hell of a lot more encumbersome than 100 pounds of lead.
Right. And again, there's a difference between encumbrance and weight.
That's right.
I mean, how in the world are you going to carry 100 pounds of feathers? You can't, right? You're too bulky. You'd be crazy.
Why would I? Unless I'm making pillows. Yeah,
exactly. So, okay, let's jump back to you, Greg. And this is number 9, DMs adjudicating PCs who attempt to drink potions and read scrolls in combat.
Yep. Great area of discussion for DMs like myself who try and toe that line as close to physics and reality as possible within a fantasy role-playing setting, right? I believe that that's how the game was intended to be written, based in physics, right? Based in realism within a fantasy campaign, which obviously, you know, makes the experience a little more immersive, right? You have to, I've heard this before, I can't recall where, but you have to disbelieve, right? Put yourself into this scenario and make it feel real. That's the immersion that D&D allows if you just love playing the game. And in any of the versions, right? It's that type of role-playing game, and that's the difference between ROLL role-playing and ROLE role-playing. Right. So potions and scrolls, you know, hey, why not? You're in melee, you're getting attacked by a troll, he gets 3 attacks. Why can't I just pull out a potion and drink it? Now I've got giant strength 5 segments later. Well, because it's not that easy. So as a DM, I would always encourage you to, you know, adjudicate a player who's trying to find a potion to start with, depending upon where it is. Again, getting back to the encumbrance, the location of the items on your PCs, you know, manage that stuff relatively tightly, you know, obviously with some flexibility, but trying to pull a potion out of a pouch, trying to uncork it, trying to put it to your lips and then chug it, right? I mean, it takes a little while to chug a pint of milk. I've tried it, but try doing that while you're getting beat on by a giant troll. Little difficult. So the DMG has some nice references to drinking potions on page 119. What I also love about that page is the potion miscability table. Who doesn't want to just combine 2 potions at any random time? Always exciting. But the same thing goes for scrolls, right? Say you're a mage. And that's why mages were initially, I believe in part, weak. And they should be played that way with minimal melee experience and or effectiveness, is they should step back. They shouldn't be in melee. Pulling out a scroll, a piece of parchment, where is it? Well, it's in a scroll tube. Well, you got to uncork that bad boy. You got to reach in there, and God forbid you have more than 1 scroll. And then you pull it out and you have to unravel it and you have to read it. You know, these things take time. They take 5 segments mostly for reading scrolls or the time duration of the spell itself. There's also segments that I add as a DM for locating that object if it's not readily available. Try and make it real, challenge your PCs. But as a DM, mitigating those 2 activities, drinking potions and reading scrolls, add segments for finding them unless they have them readily available. Make sure they know where they are so that they can articulate to the DM, this is what I'm doing. And, you know, pair that with your initiative rule set that you use. I find that stating actions first, then rolling initiative makes things more exciting, because it's always nice when PCs do 2 different actions, then they roll their initiative, and then they trip over each other. Always fun. Got to build a storyline. But those are the 2 ways that those are some ideas just around adjudicating drinking potions in melee and reading scrolls in melee as well. Or if not in melee, just putting it into initiative.
You ever think about trying to determine what would happen when scrolls mix in the stomach?
You mean eating paper? I used to do that in high school.
Like imagine within a set encounter, I drank like 3 or 4 potions. Do they mix in the stomach and explode? Something crazy happen?
They could. They absolutely could. You know what? I think we should try that with your mage next time. Just sit back while everyone else is fighting, drink 2 potions, and then add a 3rd and see what happens. And if you have a luck stone on you, it's only even better. You'd be lucky to have it blow up.
Okay. This brings us to the next one, which is pretty simple, I would say, but it's one that, again, kind of confuses people, and I don't think a lot of people play it right. Is it differences between the charm spell and monster charm? So if we look at the this is the druidic spell, and it's the same for magic users, although magic users can only charm people. Charm person or mammal, right? It's an enchantment. 4 segments cast, and you again you can charm someone within visual range, and they get a save versus spells, and if they fail, of course, then they are, you know, they may follow simple orders that you issue them, that they're going to be their disposition towards you is going to be friendly and kind, this kind of thing. And then the duration depends on the intelligence score of the target, how long that target remains charmed. Okay, perfectly simple. But what about monsters, right? Specifically, creatures like vampires. It gets a little more confusing because you know, it does say that it's like the spell, right, in the monster manual. A vampiric charm requires the vampires to gaze into a victim's eyes. So remember that right there, it's not really a spell. There's no verbal component, really. It's just a vampire staring into your eyes. And the victim saves at -2 versus spells. So vampiric charm is more powerful. Then we get into the situation, or the question is, how long does it last? Now, in D&D, it's if you want to treat it like a charm spell, you look at the intelligence of the creature and you adjust accordingly, make, you know, additional saves later. But that's not really the way charm works in the movies. For vampires, it's not the way it works in the books. I mean, you're charmed, you are charmed.
Yeah,
right?
Nosferatu. Yeah, that movie, which is right, thumbs up for that movie. She was charmed.
Nosferatu. I mean, she was kind of charmed, right? She was ensorcelled by Count Orlok, right? Or we think of Mina Harker.
From a distance.
Yeah, from a distance. It wasn't like she shook it off in 4 rounds. right? That's so Vampiric Charm is it's going to be stronger because it's -2 to save versus it. But I think DM's discretion here, make it longer. Definitely make it longer and more powerful. It makes a vampire a lot more dangerous, especially if you're playing like I6 Ravenloft or I10 Ravenloft 2. Make those charms count. I mean, when people get charmed, it's bad, right? Strahd has control of you, that's some degree of control over you, and you're just enraptured or enthralled or ensorcelled, and it becomes a really bad situation. Now, interestingly enough, the Dryad in the monster manual on page 35, check this out. I texted you about this last night. I was laughing. They can charm you, okay? -3 to save versus spells. And then they can take you away. I mean, literally just take you into the forest with a 50% chance that you never return.
I'm in.
Yeah, like that's it. I mean, there's no duration
here. Lately? I'm in.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like you get charmed and you just get pulled into the forest, and that's it. I mean, it's like, okay, roll up a new character. Your old one's enjoying his life with the Dryad somewhere in the forest.
Wait a minute. Why would I have to roll a new character? I just want to enjoy what the one's doing that's off with the Dryad in the woods. Can't I just play it?
But well, that sounds fun, but the charm of the Harpy on Monster Manual page 51, that's a different situation. When the Harpy touches you,
they talk like sailors. They talk like sailors and truck drivers, and that are, nothing against truck drivers or sailors. I don't want to get canceled.
It's worse because if they touch you and charm you, it isn't like the spell charm. You are basically kind of catatonic. You will do anything for them, and they just like disembowel you and torture you and tear you apart and eat you, and you enjoy it. That's literally what happened. Like that's the Harpy charm.
I don't know how you would enjoy that, but okay.
Yeah, so clearly there's a difference between monster charm and the spell charm, even though in portions of the monster manual it says, well, treat this as the spell charm. Well, it's not really. I mean, not the way it's described in the monster ability. So keep that on your mind as a DM when you're using it. Make the charm count, make it deadly, dangerous. I know, I'm sure with you, Greg, is that as a player, when I'm going through dungeons or campaigns or whatever, charm is like the worst. I mean, I do not want to get charmed. That's bad.
No. Especially by a monster. You're right. And there's plenty of references, right? Not just with charm in first edition or other D&D editions. There's always a reference to the spell, but it's a reference as in spell like. It's like the spell. It's not as the spell. And innate abilities, there's other references out there. We can always look those up. But there are references in various, either Dragon magazine or what have you, where they talk about the power of the innate ability of a monster is superior to that of any spell. Yes. And that makes sense. And that's why I'm going to be running that To Kill a Vampire, because that charm is going to be fun against you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's going to be good.
You will be my slave, Colin.
Another one to think about, and again, is the Ghost's Magic Jar capability.
Oh, geez.
Like duration and that kind of thing on that. Like, I don't think that's like the spell. I think that's something far, far worse. So you're going to have to kind of modify that as a DM. But
well, that you bring up a good point. I mean, remember we had that one discussion, and get a little off rails here, but you got a bard's ability for legend lore.
Oh, yeah.
It's a perfect example there as well. Legend lore is a 7th level magic user spell. There's no way that a bard who goes from tavern to tavern getting hammered and singing songs and dancing around in silly boots is going to know more about a 2,000-year-old set of magical plate mail than a 7th level mage who's sitting in his study doing arcane work. But again, they're like each other. They're just different. Adjudicate them as that's best for your game.
Yeah, remember the huge argument that erupted one of our games is that, and again, this is a perfect example of old school D&D where the DM's discretion takes precedence. So we had a situation where we were the players. Greg was a DM, and we had like basically found this. It was like Tutankhamun kind of thing. It was like some tomb that like nobody even knew about. This thing had been lost for like 5,000 years, right? I mean, it was just like buried in the desert somewhere. And we got into this tomb. We dug into it like archaeologists and went through these doors and sealed passageways and everything. And I think we popped open some chest or coffer or something, and we found some sort of wand or magic item. And instantly, the guy next to me is like, "I use my bardic lore to figure out what it does." And Greg's like, "No, you don't. Like, you have no idea what that freaking thing does, right?"
Yeah. I'll let you roll. Right.
The player had a fit, but it was like, no, that makes no sense, dude. You're not gonna. You're in a tavern and some guy tells you about, there's this wand out in the desert buried for 5,000 years and it does A, B, and C. Like, there's no way you would know, right? So again, DM's discretion, right? And the DM has final say, and it has to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, the abilities are ridiculous. So
yeah. And it has to make sense from both perspectives, right? The players and the DMs to the most degree, but good point.
Right. And that brings us to our last thing, which is use of not using miniatures. And how does that impact the game, Greg?
Well, that's just because I'm in love with buying minis. That's all. I don't run a game without full terrain or minis. But no, just a lighthearted one here is, the DMG talks about the use of miniatures. It talks about the HO scale equivalency, the 1-inch squares, all the movement factors, you name it all. But it takes me back to when I first started playing, like I'll age myself. I'll lie and say 79, 80. And when we used to play with the old Grenadiers and, they were full lead and we'd lick our fingers afterwards. And that's why we got twitches today. But point is, the use of minis just really, I have to encourage any DM, find a way to work them in, find a way to get some tiles on the table, use a battle mat, use the markers. If you don't have minis or you don't have the resources to purchase minis, then, use dice, use something, just because when you have a situation where you're trying to adjudicate space, distance, time, all of that helps the players use their creativity and their minds, right? The power of the mind, and just trying to get immersed within the game. But here's an example of some minis used. So this will kind of illustrate what we're talking about here on this one is encourage you to use minis, objects, things that will help you move the game along and help the players really be able to understand distance, space, time, and so on. But here's the one, Colin. This is when, if you can see beyond the type 4 demon there that was summoned, you have a mage in the background. You have a ranger in front of him. You have a cleric on the ground. I think there was a fighter, a couple mummies dead, and some zombies. But this was, Colin, this is when your mage was getting beat on by a zombie. And I had to adjudicate you reading a scroll.
Oh, yeah.
And you read, was it, oh my gosh, because
like control. What was it?
Hold Monster. It was Hold Monster. And you had and I think a type 4 has like a 65%.
Not against the zombie, because that wouldn't work.
Right. And why would you?
Demon against the demon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We have another map here. Let's see. Was that him? Was that the demon?
That's the backside of the demon right there.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
So you read the scroll because the zombie attacks last. You won initiative. You went before him with the scroll through adjudication. And then the demon who was coming towards you, and you only had like 4 hit points left. And the magic resistance failed. And then the saving throw failed.
Yeah, that was like a Galbrazu or something, that demon.
Yeah.
Like type 4. Yeah, he's going to kill us.
So. Oh, there was no doubt. You were toast. And it was just one of those epic moments where I like to let the dice roll out in front of the players. I like to use the minis and the terrain. We've got some other pictures as well that we can just briefly touch on. But this was a great moment in game playing. Epic moment. I love it when my players do the exceptional and they do it right in front of you.
Yeah. Now, there are sections in the DMG that obviously deal with miniatures usage in combat and this kind of stuff. Keep in mind that, and again, this is, I think you and I have talked about this, Greg. Remember, an AD&D a round is a minute.
Yep.
So one way I like to play, and again, this is pure DM's discretion here. Even if using minis, try not to get too caught up in fixed positioning.
That's right.
You are within, like, you are moving around that 10-foot square. You're doing things. Okay. You're not just standing there. Now, why is that important? Well, I think we touched on this in a previous episode. A lot has to do with things like backstab, where modern gamers, like in 5th edition, what they'll do, which I think is not metagaming, but it's just kind of gaming the system, is constantly moving their mini around to get behind the opponent, and then backstab back, like over sneak attack or whatever, over and over again. Okay, it's like, that's not really permitted in AD. Like, there are specific rules, which, you know, we won't get into them here, but have to do with the way that you would adjudicate like a backstab situation. It involves surprise and moving silently and hiding in this kind of thing, and taking somebody completely unaware in a sense that they are a fixed target because they're totally unaware. If somebody's aware of you, he's not going to be turning his back to you to get stabbed.
That's right. That's right. Not if they're an intelligent creature anyways.
Right. So you don't have that, you know, video gamey moving behind the character, like, because it totally makes the thief completely overpowered.
Right.
In later editions. The other thing was, and I was going to ask you this. Here's a good trivia question for DMs, is that what rule really only ever comes into play in AD&D, especially when using the DMG, if you're using minis and tight positioning? What thing comes into play that normally doesn't come into play? It's something we never use.
Oh, well, if we never use it, I wouldn't know.
Rear AC.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, when you're being attacked from the backside, you know, like we often do, there's always an adjustment.
Yeah, there can be, but again, it's and I think Gary at one point says this in the DMG. It's like, if you want to get tight with the minis, you know, really want to get like rear AC is going to come into play now, right? If you want to play it like I did when I was a teenager, real loosey goosey or whatever, we never used rear AC. We didn't get it. We did shieldless, right? If you lose your shield, but we didn't do rear. Just like we didn't really do weapon speed.
Right.
Until I was much older, we kind of played around with weapon speed, but again, it makes things really complicated. So yeah, there's some nice terrain pieces.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, again, just wrapping that one up, I think that minis and terrain, although maybe cumbersome and somewhat difficult, use of them really helps with players understanding positioning, movement, distance, things like that. And that's what we wanted to talk about here, is they can help you as a DM, they can help you as a player. And then we also get an opportunity to show off some of our painting and some of our product.
Yeah, true. You like to paint.
I finished up a whole bunch this over the holidays.
Yeah, and then we have our one buddy that we game with, who's like, he enters national contests.
Oh yeah, Ryan. Yeah,
and it's like, I mean, it's off the hook, and the stuff looks gorgeous. I mean, he does it with like these, he's like full on, you know, powerful magnifying glass and paint. I mean, it's like super detailed. They look amazing. Yeah. So maybe we'll get a couple pictures of his stuff and we'll put it up next time.
Well, yeah, that'd be neat.
But yeah, I think we're about.
Hey, how do those two minis get in there?
Those are your grandkids, right?
They are. And on my left, looking at the screen, that's Patrick. His name's Patrick Henry. Give me death. And the one on the right, the little pudgy one in the middle, he's new. He just popped out a couple months ago. He's about 3 months right now. So, and his name is Donald John.
Nice. Good. Well, yeah, I don't have any grandkids yet. I have 2 boys, but.
And you can't have mine.
Nope. I don't want them.
I had to get permission just to have that picture posted here, but those are my 2 minis.
There we go.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Yeah, so I think that Roll Aids Dragon supplement. I definitely want to do something with that. So
Okay.
for our viewers, expect an episode on that coming up probably soon within the next few weeks. That would be fun to do because I have not looked through that thing in like decades.
Right.
And it would be cool to go look through it. I think I have the PDF. I can shoot that over to you, Greg, if you don't. And you probably have the physical copy, right?
That one I do not have, but I know where to get it.
Yeah, I mean, Troll and Toad, probably. Games Plus.
Oh, Troll and Toad. What are you opening your own store?
Yeah.
Toad Hall. Toad Hall.
Toad Hall. That's Troll.
Well, we controlled Toad Hall, so that would be kind of maybe that's what you meant.
Right.
We controlled them. But so what else is new, Colin? I mean, I know we're at the hour, but it's 2025. Happy New Year to everybody, and we've got some cons coming up, right? Did you?
All right, guys, I'm here. What did I miss?
There he is.
Were you sleeping again, Michael?
Or something.
Yeah. So we got a couple cons coming up, right? You've got Con of the Cobb released their dates. Their webpage is up to date. So
Chaosium Con.
Chaosium Con. I think you need to look into that, Colin. I think Chaosium is celebrating their 50th anniversary this year.
I didn't think they were that old. I thought they were like.
I think they are. They're 1 year behind D&D.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'll check that out because I'm going to go to Chaosium Con this year. Obviously, I'm going to call it Cthulhu, right? I'll probably run my Reactor 4 Chernobyl adventure. And I will probably run my Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys adventure. And I'll have to get Michael to create some more rings for me for that.
Yes.
That's a fun one.
Did Michael just get out of the shower, or am I hallucinating?
He's always like that.
Oh, that's how he normally walks around?
He's just unironically walks around like that.
Yeah, my girl just left, had my massage today, so that's all good. Now, if I get to go to that convention, this is what I'm running. I got my list. I'm going to try to run 6 games. So I'm doing my Sesame Street, Terror on the Love Boat, a Speed Racer adventure. I might do my Between a Pet Rock and a Hard Place 70s cops adventure. You get to play Starsky and Hutch and Koshak and Cannon is there, and Beretta.
Karate chopping people, driving around in his Lincoln Continental, kicking ass, taking names.
Yeah, maybe the Scooby-Doo. I have to write that one, and I'm thinking of doing an alien adventure with Thunderbirds, but set in a Call of Cthulhu setting. So I got the dolls, the little 10-inch action figures. So that's right there on the shelf.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I was actually I'm running tonight the new Alien game from for my wife and kids. That's a great game.
But you're running first edition, which is no longer in print. What you're saying?
I think this is a new game. I also got the Blade Runner game.
Second edition is coming out, so you're still within the Dead Games thing.
There we go.
You wouldn't be playing a in-print game, correct, Colin?
Well, I can do that at home. I just can't do it at conventions.
No, that's not the rules.
Right.
You cannot play any new game out. How long have you been with the BGS?
10 years.
In the very beginning.
Yeah.
These are the rules. That's why I got books sitting on my shelf that I can't even open yet.
That's right.
Because they're still first edition and they haven't released a second.
Yeah, I haven't decided what I'm going to run at Con of the Cobb. I'll just have to put some stuff.
Run something fun this time, not like last time. People left your game, I hear.
And then
more than one.
Fun to kill a vampire.
That's that'll be in April at WizardCon. So I'm looking.
You're going to run at Con of the Cobb too, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be in, and Michael will be impressed. I will be in full vampiric dress.
Right, and then of course Greg has a module coming out from Wizard Tower Games.
It's in publication right now. We'll have more to share on that, but they're doing a real nice job putting that together, and I'm excited. But the problem is I've got 3 more that I have sitting on my desk that I'd like to go to publication, but got to go through the full round of experience the first time, and then you could start releasing more.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Well, all right, guys, it's a little after the hour. I don't want to drag it on too long here. So for everybody, if you like this content, obviously, hit like, subscribe.
Ooh, I will. I'll do it right now.
Yeah, we're just doing this for fun, and we will see you at the upcoming conventions. Those are at least the ones we're going to. We might go to more as the year progresses and we check out our schedules. But aside from that, I'm going to sign off.
All right. Happy New Year, everybody. Great to see you.
Have a great New Year. We'll see you soon.
All right.
All right.
New Year.